Bienvenido a Noche de Pesadillas, cuando el día muere y la oscuridad toma el control. Las pesadillas despiertan para adueñarse de tu mente. Cada susurro trae consigo una historia más terrorífica que la anterior. Y cada sombra proyectada por la luna esconde un secreto oscuro que espera ser revelado. Aquí no existen escapatorias ni refugios seguros. Solo relatos que penetrarán en tu alma y harán latir tu corazón al ritmo del terror absoluto. Prepárate, porque esta noche tus peores miedos cobrarán vida y te atraparán sin piedad hasta el amanecer. Phantoms, specters, the unseen. Such notions held no sway over me until 3 weeks passed. The memory loops, an insistent film reel behind my eyes, demanding interpretation. Futile, perhaps, this act of inscription, yet I must try. I witnessed it. Fenrir witnessed it. And the hardwood floor bears scars that refuse to fade. Tuesday. The evening unspooled like any other. Me, adrift in the blue glow of some televised inanity. Thumbs tracing patterns on my phone screen. Fenrir, my hulking shepherd, a 4-year-old shadow draped across his corner bed, master of profound slumber. Utterly typical. He's a creature of immense placidity, this rescue dog. In our 3 years together, his bark has been a rare currency, spent only 5 times. A startled delivery driver, 2 territorial squirrels, 1 crack of thunder, a shrieking smoke alarm. The shelter confirmed it. Stillness was his factory setting. Outside, the wind found its voice around 8:30. I know because the phone's illuminated face told me so, just as thoughts of early sleep began to beckon. Branches clawed at the window panes, that familiar autumnal rasp. Lights stuttered once, twice, then surrendered the room to absolute black. No great crisis. Outages are woven into the fabric of rural life. My phone became a meager beacon as I scrolled on. A few minutes, I figured, before the flashlight hunt began. That's when Fenrir erupted from stillness. Head snapped up, ears pivoted like radar dishes, body coiled tight. His gaze locked onto the room's far corner, the one dominated by the cold, unused brick hearth. I followed his stare. Nothing. Just depthless shadows clinging to the masonry. "What is it, boy?" I murmured. He remained oblivious, transfixed. A ridge of fur bristled along his spine. Then the sound tore from his throat, a low, guttural growl. Ice traced my veins. Fenrir never growled. Not at encroaching dogs, not at unfamiliar humans, not at sudden noises. This sound, though, it wasn't mere warning. It was ancient, visceral, bypassing thought to clamp directly onto my adrenal glands. I swung the phone's beam toward the corner. Vacant space. Only the cold brick, a leaning tower of forgotten magazines, the intricate lacework of cobwebs I perpetually intended to vanquish. Nothing to provoke such a reaction. "Fenrir, easy," I tried, my voice betraying me with a tremor. He rose to all fours, the growl deepening into a resonant threat. I saw the glint of his teeth, a formidable display. His tail stood out, ramrod straight, legs locked, every sinew taut, a predator primed. Then came the barking, not the sharp alerts I knew, but a frantic, savage cacophony. Fury, desperation, sheer terror poured from him, the sound battering the walls, consuming the small house. I had never conceived of such a noise. Suddenly the air turned frigid. No metaphor. The temperature plummeted as if a void had opened into winter. My own breath plumed white in the phone's weak light. Fenrir's barks twisted, escalating into a raw sound, caught somewhere between a roar and a shriek. He surged forward, jaws snapping violently at nothingness, retreated, then lunged again, a frantic dance with an invisible adversary. Then I heard it, scratching. Not Fenrir's claws on the floorboards, but emanating from the corner. A rasp like talons scoring wood, yet deeper, resonant, a vibration that set my teeth on edge. And then my phone blinked out. Utter blackness descended, absolute and suffocating. Only sound remained. Fenrir's frenzied barking, the relentless grinding scratch escalating, the glacial air searing my lungs. Motion failed me. Thought failed me. I stood, a useless statue, while my dog waged war in the suffocating dark. The scratching intensified, drawing nearer. Fenrir's barks grew ragged, edged with panic. I heard the sharp clap of his jaws meeting air, a furious snarl, and then another sound, obscene, like thick, damp hide being stretched taut to tearing point. Paralyzed, listening to my protector fight for us against the unseen. Abruptly, light flooded back. No flicker, no warning herald. One instant, impenetrable dark. The next, the harsh glare of the overhead fixture. Fenrir stood before the hearth, flanks pumping, still braced for combat. But the corner was empty. No intruder, human or animal. Nothing. My voice, when I found it, was a cracked whisper. "Fenrir, come on, boy." He held his ground for a long moment. Then the tension slowly bled from his frame. He turned, met my gaze and his eyes. They held an expression I'd never witnessed, a haunted knowing that spoke of horrors no canine mind should comprehend. He padded over, pressing his trembling body hard against my legs. Fenrir, my stoic, unflappable companion, shook like a leaf in a gale. It was then my gaze fell upon the floor. Scored into the polished hardwood were deep gouges, brutal wounds in the timber. 4 parallel furrows, each perhaps 8 inches in length, as if immense claws had dug in and raked across the surface. The wood around them was splintered, violently torn. These were not the marks of Fenrir's nails. They were far deeper, wider, and disturbingly the edges looked charred, seared as if by intense heat. Keys materialized in my hand. Fenrir needed no urging. He was a taut spring poised at the exit. We fled to the sterile anonymity of a roadside motel. Morning brought the predictable wave of self-doubt. Fatigue, I reasoned. Shadows playing tricks in the blackout. Perhaps the scratches were old damage, previously unnoticed. A mouse in the wall cavity? A raccoon investigating the chimney? Logic strained for purchase. I returned to the house, bathed now in the unforgiving light of day, conducting a forensic sweep. No broken locks, no shattered panes, no muddy footprints. The chimney flue undisturbed. The sole testament to the night's terror remained etched into the floor. Those 4 heat-blackened gouges. I documented them. Photographs, measurements, comparisons to Fenrir's own paw prints. The marks dwarfed his, plunged deeper than any canine could inflict. Research into local fauna yielded nothing remotely capable. No bear, no cougar, no known creature matched the violence inscribed on my floorboards. Fortifications followed. Security cameras, motion detectors, a formidable new deadbolt. I even stooped to burning sage, a ritual I'd previously scorned. chasing away unseen miasmas with fragrant smoke. 2 weeks passed under a fragile truce. Fenrir gave the fireplace corner a wide berth, a silent testament, but otherwise a semblance of normalcy returned. The cameras recorded only empty rooms. The sensors remained dormant. Complacency began to seep back in. Perhaps I had magnified the incident. Then last night, the familiar plunge into darkness. Before the final flicker died, Fenrir was growling, that same low frequency of dread. No hesitation this time. I snatched the keys, and we were hurtling into the night before the presence in the corner could fully manifest. This chronicle unfolds in yet another transient motel room. Fenrir lies beside me, a warm, solid weight against my leg, a living seismograph of fear. He hasn't strayed an inch all night. Periodically, his head lifts, his gaze fixes on the junction of walls opposite, but thus far, silence prevails. A realtor was contacted this morning. The house will be listed, sold at whatever price it takes. Let some other soul grapple with the entity by the hearth. But the truly chilling question burrows deep. Without Fenrir's primal alarm, would I have ever perceived the intrusion? How many evenings had it observed me from that shadowed recess while I sat, oblivious, lost in mundane distractions? And now, huddled in this anonymous room, the question metastasizes. Did it follow? Fenrir's head just came up again. He stares intently at the corner, ears pricked forward. I must cease writing. Another motel awaits, one hopefully boasting fail-safe power. I scrutinize every intersection of wall and ceiling now. You should too. And if your animal companion exhibits the slightest deviation, the barest hint of unease directed at empty space, heed it. Do not rationalize. Flee. They perceive realms closed to us. I accept this now, a bitter knowledge. The light outside is fading. Fenrir is on his feet. The fur along his spine erects. We must leave. Now. 3 days adrift. I hadn't intended to continue this record, but necessity compels. We migrate nightly, motel to motel across the county, seeking refuge that evaporates with the dawn. Fenrir finds no peace. His vigil is constant, eyes tracking the corners, low growls rumbling at vacancies only he perceives. Last night, refueling the car, I encountered Silas, my neighbor from the lane. He inquired about my absence. Renovations, I mumbled, unwilling to voice the madness. His expression shifted, grew somber. Had I experienced difficulties at the house? He hesitated, prefacing his words with reluctance, but confessed he'd been meaning to raise something. It transpired the couple who sold me the property 3 years prior also kept a dog, a formidable Rottweiler. Silas recalled their abrupt departure, a midnight exodus that had always struck him as peculiar. He knew their new whereabouts. They hadn't fled the county entirely. This morning I stood on their doorstep. The woman who answered recognized my address instantly, her face drained of color. "The corner?" she whispered, her voice thin. "Is it about the corner by the fireplace?" Her Rottweiler, she explained, had perished 2 weeks after their flight from my house. Officially, a heart attack, but she shared the hidden truth. During a blackout, the dog had battled an unseen horror in that precise corner. The gouges left behind mirrored those now scarring my floors. They had relocated 4 times since. Each new dwelling became tainted. The power would fail, The dog would erupt in fury at some corner, and the identical scorched scratches would appear. That pattern repeated, a relentless haunting until the Rottweiler succumbed. After his death, the manifestations ceased. She shut the door against my questions, the sound of her weeping audible from within. These words are typed from the driver's seat, the car hurtling north into anonymity. Fenrir occupies the back, a vigilant sentinel scanning the passing landscape. No destination guides us, only the imperative to drive. Dusk settles, painting the sky in bruised colors. The fuel needle dips perilously low. A stop is imminent. Fenrir has begun to growl again, a low thrum of anxiety. Will distance be salvation? The woman's ordeal suggests otherwise. Mere miles offered no sanctuary. Yet perhaps vast remoteness holds a chance. We must try. Reader, if you possess such a companion, and the lights ever fail, do not linger. Do not seek reason. Run. The streetlights ahead are beginning to pulse erratically. We drive on. A week hence, this shall be the final entry. We crossed the border, finding refuge deep in the Canadian wilderness. A cabin, leagues from any power grid, sustained by sun and stored energy. Its main living space, blessedly, is circular. No corners to harbor unseen watchers. 3 days now, Fenrir's growls have ceased. He sleeps beside me as I write, a true, untroubled slumber, not the tense doze of recent memory. Have we outrun it? Is this remoteness a shield it cannot breach? Or does it merely bide its time, savoring the pursuit across leagues and borders? Regardless, we are prepared. Provisions are stockpiled, generators stand ready, defenses acquired, though their efficacy against such strangeness feels doubtful. Crucially, I have Fenrir. His calm is my barometer, my assurance of temporary peace. The sun dips below the pines. The solar lamps glow, unwavering and bright. Fenrir breathes the deep, even rhythm of sleep. For this moment, it suffices. The familiar groans of aging timber, the house breathing its nocturnal sighs. These were sounds I'd long learned to dismiss. A settling floorboard, a contraction in the wood. Mundane physics, nothing more. But the subtle resonances emanating from the uppermost reaches of my home, from the gabled space above, have eroded that comfortable certainty. There are no phantoms coalescing in the gloom up there, no spectral dust motes dancing in unseen currents. There is only this, a faint, sympathetic thrumming through the floor planks whenever I venture into the attic, as though some other weight shifts in concert with my own, step for hesitant step. Mine is a solitary existence in a 2-story dwelling crowned by this attic, situated where winters bite deep. The loft, choked for years with the detritus of previous lives and my own accumulated clutter, served primarily as insulation, a buffer against the cold, a fact I'd passively accepted since acquiring the property some years ago. Its cramped, dust-laden interior, navigated by a precarious folding ladder descending from the hall ceiling, held no allure, offered no utility I required, until, inevitably, the lower floors began to bulge. Boxes brimming with relics of past employment, stacks of unread books, garments long outgrown, the tangled ganglia of obsolete electronics, they demanded a reckoning. An organizational purge was in order. Cull the unnecessary, perhaps liberate a few items to charity, impose order on the chaos. The day I first ascended those narrow, complaining steps remains sharp in memory. The assault of stale, particulate air, the claustrophobic press of low rafters and ancient, dusty beams. Cobwebs draped the corners like macabre lace, and a single naked bulb cast a sickly orange glow, barely illuminating the cramped confines. I began the sorting, unearthing forgotten strata, brittle magazines, sheaves of receipts, defunct cables, the fractured remains of furniture exiled years prior. Shifting a teetering column of boxes revealed something hitherto unseen, nestled near the far wall. They appeared as archaic supports, perhaps vestigial framing from some long-abandoned construction phase. Thick, dark timbers forming partial dividers, strange skeletal partitions lacking any obvious function. Hidden as they were, their existence had been a secret. Donning gloves, I tested one of the uprights. It felt solid, rooted, yet groaned softly under pressure. The wood possessed an unnerving patina of age, seeming far older than the surrounding structure, joined not with nail or screw, but by antiquated mortise and tenon, fitted with unsettling precision. An oddity, nothing more, I told myself, and returned to my task, eventually descending with bags of refuse, leaving the enigmatic joinery undisturbed in the dimness. Sleep claimed me that night, only to relinquish its hold in the deepest hours. A faint sound pricked the silence, the soft, dry friction of wood against wood. It echoed the house's usual creaks, yet possessed a disquieting rhythm. A brief pause, then the sound again. Footsteps. Lying rigid in the darkness, consciousness snagged between sleep and alarm. I recited the familiar litany. An old house, shifting timbers, perfectly normal. Still, a frisson of unease traced my spine. The sound ceased after a minute, and slumber eventually reclaimed me. The following day saw my return to the loft, armed with marker, tape, and notebook, intent on labeling the survivors of the purge. As I moved across the floor, a peculiar sensation arose through the soles of my feet, a delicate trembling in the planks, a subtle resonance that felt disconcertingly like nearby pacing, though not precisely where I stood. Paranoia, I reasoned, a lingering echo of the night's disturbance. Yet as I continued my work, shifting cartons and kneeling to label, the vibration persisted, a faint but undeniable counterpoint to my own movements. I knelt, pressing my palm flat against the dusty boards. No visible cracks, no discernible shifting. But rising again, I heard it, a gentle creak from behind me, soft as a drawn breath, perfectly timed with my own step. I spun around, nothing but stacked boxes and the stoic presence of those dark timber frames. I took a cautious step towards the rear wall. A faint answer came from the opposite side of the space, another board whispering its protest. I moved left. The sound mirrored me, moving right. Holding my breath, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, I listened. The cramped space offered no room for pursuit, only stillness. The moment I ceased moving, the answering creaks fell silent. That silence crawled over my skin, colder than any draft. Settling wood is one thing, wood that mimics your cadence, that stills when you still, is something else entirely. Drawing a ragged breath, I forced myself back to the task, clinging to logic. Perhaps some acoustic anomaly, a trick of resonance in the old structure? Or could it be raccoons, squirrels? Yet there were no droppings, no telltale gnaw marks, no obvious points of ingress. The attic was otherwise profoundly quiet. Only my own motion seemed to awaken this responsiveness. 40 minutes stretched into an eternity before I conceded defeat. I descended the ladder, secured the hatch, and sat for a long while in the living room below, letting the ordinary world seep back in, trying to soothe the jangled edges of my nerves. Errands, cooking, television, the mundane anesthesia worked for a time. But later, cocooned in bed, I thought I discerned faint thuds from overhead, tracing a slow, deliberate pattern. I remained burrowed beneath the covers, consciously slowing my breathing until the sounds faded, leaving only a residue of brittle tension. Morning brought resolve, one final ascent. I needed concrete evidence, signs of pests, loose floorboards, structural faults, anything tangible to dispel the growing dread. Pulling down the ladder, I climbed once more into the familiar miasma of aged wood and dust. The overhead bulb seemed weaker, flickering uncertainly as I tugged its chain. My eyes swept the floor. Everything remained precisely as I'd left it. The same configuration of boxes, the same inscrutable wooden structures brooding near the back. I paced the perimeter, flashlight beam probing shadowed corners and dusty recesses. No holes, no droppings, nothing to suggest animal intrusion. Stomping experimentally on various sections yielded only sturdy resistance, punctuated by those same muted, complaining creaks. Drawn again to the back wall towards the timber frames, I grasped one and pulled, testing its solidity. It held fast, unyielding. Tapping its surface produced a dull, solid thud. As I turned to leave, the vibration returned beneath my feet, a low, almost imperceptible hum. I wheeled around, flashlight beam cutting between the boxes. No visible movement, yet with each step I took, a soft squeak answered from a different quadrant of the attic. A chilling sense of being circled, paced by something unseen, tightened its grip on my stomach. My muscles locked, the fine hairs on my arms prickled. Calm frayed at the edges, my breathing growing shallow and quick. A test. I stood utterly still, mastering my breath. Silence. Then deliberately one long stride forward. The attic replied, a slow, drawn-out creak from directly behind me. I jerked around, light slashing across the floorboards. Empty. A step sideways. Another squeak, this time from behind one of the timber uprights. I walked a slow, tight circle, and the sound shadowed me, orbiting my position. Sweat bloomed on my palms, an invisible presence keeping perfect, synchronous time with my movements, always just beyond the periphery. The need to escape warred with a desperate, irrational urge to confirm this impossible dialogue. Placing my palm flat on the floor again, pressing down gently, I felt it, a faint, answering pulse beneath my hand, a single throb, then stillness. My heart hammered violently. Scrambling to my feet, mouth dry, legs unsteady, I forced myself towards the ladder, descending with clumsy haste, pulling the folding stairs up, slamming the hatch shut, sealing the attic away as quickly as my trembling hands allowed. In the hallway below, I stood listening, breath tearing raggedly in my chest. Silence from above. Weeks bled into one another. I avoided the attic hatch, yet found my gaze drawn to it whenever I passed beneath. A subconscious vigilance took hold, listening for the slightest sound. At night sometimes, the subtle footstep-like creaks would return from overhead. Not consistently, but often enough to fray my sleep, to seed the quiet hours with unease. Calling an inspector, An exterminator. The words died on my lips. How to articulate this phenomenon, this responsive wood, this vibration that answered my presence, without sounding like a man unmoored from reality? Curiosity, or perhaps a deeper need for resolution, eventually gnawed through the fear. I resolved to enlist another pair of eyes and ears. I texted Leo, an old friend, framing it as a request for help assessing potentially problematic old beams, omitting the more unsettling details. He agreed readily enough, setting a date for the following week. But when the afternoon arrived, a last-minute work emergency forced him to cancel. I didn't press him. Perhaps I reasoned a final quick inspection on my own would suffice. Closure. Strapping on a headlamp, gripping a small crowbar, just in case a board needed persuasion, I ascended once more. The attic air felt heavier this time, thick with dust that rasped in my throat. I moved with deliberate slowness, beam cutting through the gloom. A few steps, the familiar protest of old boards underfoot, immediately echoed by that secondary responsive squeaking from elsewhere. Each footfall elicited a reply, a phantom step mirroring my own. My stomach lurched. I directed the light towards the timber structures at the back. There, between two of the uprights, a faint gap I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, perhaps just wide enough to reach through. Shoving boxes aside, I crouched, knees cracking in protest, headlamp beam illuminating a swirling galaxy of dust motes. I pressed against one of the timbers near the gap. It yielded slightly, but not enough. I wedged the tip of the crowbar into the seam. As the board shifted fractionally, a loud, sharp creak erupted directly behind me, closer than ever before, as if someone stood poised on the joists just overhead. My heart felt poised to detonate within my chest. A single word escaped me, quavering in the dead air. Hello? Utter silence answered. Swallowing hard, I applied pressure to the crowbar again. The board moved a few inches, revealing nothing. Only profound darkness within, the suggestion of a small enclosed void. No movement, no glint of eyes, no tangible presence. A wave of foolishness washed over me, and then several rapid, distinct squeaks in quick succession, circling me. A brief flurry of invisible steps. My pulse roared in my ears. Yanking the crowbar free, I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a box, my light swinging wildly. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just dust, stacked cartons, and those silent, ancient timbers. But I felt it. Felt the floorboards beneath my feet tremble, as if something substantial had just brushed past behind me. I spun again, light stabbing into the emptiness. Muscles clenched hard against the rising panic, sweat stinging my eyes. Enough. More than enough. I scrambled towards the attic ladder, my steps loud, frantic now. Each impact of my foot on the floor was answered by that mimicking squeak, chasing me, the sensation of being followed absolute and terrifying. My hands, slick with sweat, fumbled for the edge of the hatch. Descending the ladder felt like escaping a collapsing mine, my grip precarious, nearly missing a rung. I flipped the ladder upward, slammed the hatch closed, slid the bolt home. Leaning against the hallway wall, gasping for air, heart pounding like a trapped bird, I listened. Stillness. A fine tremor ran through my legs, the lingering resonance of adrenaline and fear. Wiping my damp forehead on my sleeve, I forced myself away, needing distance, needing solid ground beneath my feet that didn't answer back. For weeks now, I have maintained my exile. The attic remains sealed. Logically, I know I cannot ignore it indefinitely. Ownership entails responsibility, maintenance. Yet every stray creak in the night sends my thoughts spiraling upward. Sometimes, standing directly below the hatch, I hold my breath, straining to hear, waiting for a sign. Mostly silence reigns. Occasionally a single soft creak drifts down, solitary, ambiguous. I cycle through rationalizations, aging wood, wind pressure, temperature fluctuations, an impossibly stealthy rodent. None adequately explain the synchronized response, the vibrations that track my presence, the unnerving silence that falls the instant I stand still. I continue to live here, to sleep under this roof. Passing the attic ladder, I sometimes fancy I feel a minute shift in the ceiling above, a subtle acknowledgement I choose to ignore. The hatch remains locked. Those enigmatic wooden structures, the void glimpsed behind them, they remain untouched, undisturbed. Perhaps I tell myself my intrusion, my prying, awakened something dormant, agitated a presence content in its decades of stillness. A definitive answer eludes me. I only know what I hear, what I feel through the soles of my feet. It isn't loud. It causes no physical disruption. It remains confined to its domain. But whenever I breach that threshold, it's there, waiting, pacing in the shadows, its movements bound to mine. No proof, no visible manifestation, only the slow, insistent counterpoint of creaking boards, like phantom footsteps echoing my own. For now, the door stays shut. Pretending normalcy is the path of least resistance. If some unseen thing claims the dusty upper reaches of my home, so be it. I have no intention of sharing its space. Whether it's a ghost, a quirk of physics, or something else entirely, I cannot say. I only know something resides in my attic, and it moves when I move. That knowledge is sufficient to keep me downstairs, lock secured, listening to the faint, intermittent whispers from above. It is the uneasy peace I have made with this old house. At least it stays put. That will have to be enough. The instant the passenger seat beside me became void, the night curdled. One breath he was a contour, a weight sensed at the edge of sight. The next, utter absence. Only the vacant upholstery and the ceaseless percussion of rain tattooing the car's metal shell remained. Hours I'd driven, a ribbon of asphalt unspooling through the dark. The highway's trance broken only by jagged bursts of lightning that momentarily painted the sodden landscape in stark monochrome. The downpour had commenced an hour past, escalating from a timid mizzle to a furious cascade. Fatigue gnawed at me, my vision strained against the liquid curtain streaming down the windscreen. It was then I'd glimpsed him, a solitary silhouette etched against the roadside gloom, thumb extended, a portrait of waterlogged despair. Picking up strangers isn't my habit, a rule etched in caution. Yet the sheer desolation radiating from his stance compelled me. I eased the car onto the shoulder. He scrambled inside, swift and silent, trailing the scent of drenched soil and something indefinable. Ancient, perhaps. Obliged, he murmured, his voice unexpectedly subdued beneath the storm's roar. Figured I'd be rooted out there till dawn. I offered a curt nod, merging back into the relentless flow of water and road. Destination? I inquired, stealing a glance. Younger than my first impression, maybe early 20s. Raven hair lay slicked against his brow, rivulets tracing paths down his jawline to darken his already saturated jacket. "Just a little further," he answered, his gaze locked ahead, deliberately imprecise. "I'll signal you." We journeyed wrapped in a quietude, punctuated solely by the hypnotic sweep of the wipers and the drumming deluge. I was formulating a more direct question about his stop when a peculiarity snagged my attention. On his side, the rain didn't streak the window pane. Instead, the droplets seemed to recoil, veering around an unseen contour near him, defying gravity and sense. I blinked hard, convinced exhaustion was conjuring phantoms. A second look revealed nothing amiss. Just tired, I reasoned, a faint shake of my head dismissing the impossible. "You all right?" His question startled me, a sharp intrusion into the quiet. It was his first utterance since settling in. "Yes, fine," I replied too quickly. "Long haul." He inclined his head, turning back to the glass. "Foul night to be traveling," he breathed, almost to himself. "Never know what might stir in the shadows." A tremor, cold and unwelcome, traced my spine, though its source remained elusive. Before I could frame a reply, my phone shrilled, its sudden clamor making me jump. Fumbling, keeping one hand firm on the wheel, I answered. "Silas?" Static hissed back, a digital serpent. I nearly disconnected, but then a wisp of sound threaded through the interference. A voice, thin and fractured, yet undeniably words. "Aid me," it pleaded. "Please, aid me." I pressed the receiver tighter. "Hello? Who's speaking?" More corrosive, static, then clearer, urgent. "He isn't what you perceive. Depart. Flee now." The connection severed. I lowered the phone, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. What in God's name? My gaze snapped towards my passenger, a quip about poor signals dying on my lips. The seat gaped, empty. I stomped the brakes. The tires screamed a brief protest on the slick tarmac as the car slewed slightly before halting. Twisting violently, I scanned the back. Nothing. Gone. Evaporated from a sealed, moving vehicle. For a suspended moment, I simply sat, engine humming, rain pounding its relentless rhythm overhead. This wasn't feasible. People don't dematerialize. A hallucination, surely. Fatigue, darkness, the storm. My mind fabricating specters. Yet the denial felt hollow. The passenger seat still bore the damp imprint of his form. That strange, loamy fragrance lingered faintly in the air. With hands that trembled, I shifted the car into gear, pulling onto the sodden verge. I needed stillness, a moment to untangle this knot of impossibility. And then, the phone rang again. It lay on the passenger seat where I'd dropped it, vibrating with an obscene innocence. Unknown number. The same one. My hand hovered, a primal urge screaming denial, yet a deeper compulsion insisted. I snatched it up. "Hello?" My voice was a threadbare whisper. "Why did you let him in?" The voice, clearer now but still warped, distant. "Don't you understand the peril of inviting the unknown across your threshold?" "Who is this?" I demanded, fear transmuting into a brittle anger. "What is happening?" "He hasn't left," the voice stated. ignoring my plea. He remains, observing, anticipating. Silence fell again as the line went dead. Slowly I lowered the phone, my eyes darting, probing the car's interior, half convinced my erstwhile passenger would coalesce from the shadows. Nothing. Only the storm's fury, the enclosing darkness, and the vacant road stretching into infinity. Escape. The imperative hammered in my skull. I engaged the gear shift, my foot poised above the accelerator, yet an unseen force held me fast. An instinct, sharp and inexplicable. The unnerving certainty of being watched. Hesitantly, I turned my head, forcing my gaze towards the passenger side window. For a heartbeat, I saw him. Not inside, but out, standing sentinel in the downpour. Our eyes locked. He smiled. It held no warmth, only chilling possession. I slammed my foot down. Tires shrieked on the wet asphalt as the car lunged forward, my heart threatening to batter its way through my ribs. Direction was irrelevant. Distance was everything. I drove blindly, knuckles bleached white on the wheel, eyes flicking obsessively to the rear-view mirror. But the road behind remained stubbornly empty, swallowed by rain and night. Eventually, the fierce burn of adrenaline subsided, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weariness. I had to stop, regroup, attempt to impose logic on the illogical. A sign materialized through the deluge. Rest area, 1 mile. I took the exit. The lot held only a single slumbering semi-truck, parked remotely. I chose a spot far from it, cut the engine, but left the keys poised in the ignition, a small concession to paranoia. Leaning back, I closed my eyes, drawing a ragged breath. Right, Silas. Think. People don't vanish. There must be a reason, a lapse in consciousness, a waking dream. But the damp seat, the calls. Insistent reality pierced the veil of self-deception. A sharp rapping on my driver's side window shattered my thoughts. My eyes flew open, heart vaulting into my throat. A uniformed figure peered in, flashlight beam cutting the gloom, his expression professionally concerned. "Officer Thorne," his badge read. I lowered the window, striving for composure. "Everything all right, sir?" he inquired, his light sweeping the car's interior. "Been parked here a fair bit." I blinked, disoriented. I'd only just arrived, hadn't I? A glance at the dashboard clock contradicted me. Nearly an hour had bled away. "I'm fine, officer," I managed, my voice rough. "Just needed a break from the drive. This rain." He nodded, a mask of understanding. "Nasty night for it. Heading anywhere specific?" I opened my mouth, then hesitated. Where was I going? The night's terrors seemed to have scoured my memory clean. "Not certain," I confessed. "Believe I got turned around in the storm." His expression shifted minutely. A fleeting shadow, suspicion, pity, crossing his features. "Why not follow me back to the station?" he proposed. "Get you a hot coffee, help you sort your bearings." I wavered. Safety, lights, other people. The appeal was potent. But after the night's strangeness, Trust felt like a fragile, dangerous commodity. Before I could articulate a decision, my phone vibrated again. The officer noted it. "Best answer that," he said mildly. "Could be someone worried." My hand shook as I picked it up. Unknown number. Naturally. "Hello?" I braced myself. "Don't accompany him." The same disembodied voice. Urgent. "He's not what he seems. Not law. Leave. Now." Click. I looked up at Officer Thorne, who watched me with an unnervingly placid gaze. "Everything satisfactory?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Yes, just friend checking in. Actually, officer, I think I'm good to push on now. Appreciate you stopping." He didn't step back immediately. "You're quite sure? No trouble at all to head to the station?" "Positive," I said, turning the key. The engine caught. "Thanks again." He retreated then, but I felt his stare burning into my back as I navigated out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, a final glimpse. Him standing motionless, watching me recede into the storm-lashed darkness. An echo of the figure I'd seen earlier. Merging back onto the desolate highway, my phone chimed with an incoming text. Unknown number. "Continue driving," it commanded. "Do not stop before daylight. And heed this, accept no further passengers." I tossed the phone onto the damp passenger seat, my grip tightening on the wheel until my knuckles ached. The rain fell relentlessly, an endless shroud, and somewhere within that vast, consuming blackness, I felt his presence, observing, anticipating. I drove onward into the heart of the night, pursued by phantoms and cryptic warnings, unsure if I was escaping a nightmare or plunging deeper into its depths. That sound, a giggle slicing through the dead air of the derelict amusement park, was the precise moment my ordinary life fractured. A blunder born of duty, blooming instantly into a horror that clings to my waking thoughts and curdles my sleep. If only I'd heeded the tremor in my own marrow and turned my back when the chance was mine. Arthur. That's the name stitched on the uniform I wore for 3 years, patrolling the skeletal remains of Jubilee Gardens. Once a kingdom of manufactured joy, now 6 months silent, surrendered to rust and weeds. That night the summer air hung thick as velvet, a suffocating stillness broken only by the groan of cooling metal as I traced my familiar path past dormant roller coasters and sightless concession stands. Daylight rendered the place melancholy. Darkness painted it with a deeper, more primal unease. Near the skeletal carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-leap. A peripheral flutter snagged my attention, a mere twitch at the edge of my torch beam. I halted, breath held captive. Silence, thick and absolute, save for the tired sigh of contracting steel. Then it drifted across the stillness. A titter, faint, almost infantile, whispering from the direction of the spook spire, our dilapidated, haunted house. "Identify yourself." My voice, amplified by the void, felt like a clumsy intrusion. "Security, the grounds are off limits." only the heavy quiet answered. Prudence screamed for backup, for the measured tread of local law enforcement. But a foolish curiosity, that old betrayer, nudged me forward. Teenagers, surely. Misguided thrill seekers. I'd routed dozens. Yet approaching the spook spire, its garish facade peeling like sunburnt skin, the sensation of being observed prickled my neck. Cartoon specters painted beside the entrance seemed to track my torch beam with malevolent stillness. The entrance groaned, a protracted wooden sigh, as I nudged it inward. "Hello?" I called into the musty dark. "Is anyone present?" And then, the sound again, that disquieting ripple of mirth, closer now, impossibly near, perhaps just beyond the next turn. My light sliced through the gloom, anticipating startled teenage faces. What it found instead sluiced the warmth from my veins. A shape stood sentinel at the corridor's end. Not adolescent trespassers, not human at all. It was one of the park's jesters, a relic from the shuttered Chuckle Hut arcade, inexplicably present. Its fixed painted smile shone wetly under my beam. Hallucination? Fatigue? The Chuckle Hut lay across the entire expanse of Jubilee Gardens. This automaton had no business here. As disbelief held me rooted, its plastic head swiveled with a soft, dry click. Glassy orbs found mine. The painted rictus stretched, impossibly, obscenely. Then came the laughter, the same childish titter, now amplified, hysterical, a cascade of metallic glee bouncing off the decaying walls, engulfing me. Instinct screamed flight. I didn't argue. I turned, hammering back towards the entrance, pulse cannonading against my ribs, my hand slammed against the door, unyielding, bolted, jammed, some other darker mechanism at play. Behind me, the manic chortling intensified, drawing nearer. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I whirled, eyes darting wildly for an alternative escape. And then I saw them, emerging from the gloom like nightmare weeds, spectral figures, grinning harlequins, the distorted faces of cartoon mascots, all shambling forward with the stuttering gait of broken machinery. A dream. This had to be a dream. Yet the chill solidity of the wood against my spine, the cloying scent of dust and mildew, the distinct whirring protest of ancient servos, it was all irrefutably present. My fingers, trembling violently, fumbled for the radio clipped to my belt. "Arthur here," I choked out. "Requesting immediate assistance, Spook Spire." Static hissed back, a dead snake's rattle. They were closer now, these impossible puppets. Their eyes pulsed with a faint internal luminescence that defied the park's dead power grid. I could see the decay, synthetic flesh cracked and sloughing, revealing glimpses of corroded endoskeletons. Still, they advanced with a ghastly, unnatural grace, a mockery of life. Trapped against the ungiving door, desperation fueled a frantic scan of the surroundings. There, obscured by a tattered velvet drape, a small window high on the wall. A narrow chance, perhaps the only one. I surged forward, ducking beneath the reaching claw of a grotesque parody of Barnaby Bear, the park's erstwhile mascot. I felt the phantom brush of cold, articulated fingers against my back, a spur driving me onward. Reaching the window, I hammered the heavy base of my torch against the pane. Once, twice, the third blow starred the glass, then shattered it outward. Ignoring the bite of jagged edges, I scrambled, pulled, and wrenched myself through the opening, tumbling onto the dew-kissed earth outside. Air rushed back into my lungs in painful gasps. The cool, damp grass a shocking benediction against my face. Slowly, achingly, I gathered myself, rising to my feet. A sharp sting from my hands, the throb of bruises blooming, testament to the desperate passage. Behind me, the spook spire stood inert, a black cutout against the lesser dark, utterly silent. Not a flicker, not a whisper disturbed its facade. Had my mind conjured the phantoms? But the rip in my sleeve, the slick warmth of blood on my palms, these were undeniable truths. The thing within, the things that pursued, they were real. I stumbled towards the main gate, legs threatening to buckle. Get out. Find help. Warn somebody. But the park wasn't finished with me. Every shadow seemed to writhe with potential menace. Each groan of stressed metal mimicked pursuit. Nearly free, nearly at the threshold of the sane world, I heard it, that same blood-chilling titter, floating down from the skeletal heights of the Grand Centennial Wheel, its gondolas rocking gently like empty cradles. Against all reason, I looked up. There, silhouetted in the highest car, a figure sat. Even diminished by distance, the painted leer, the bulbous nose, the garish costume were unmistakable. It lifted an articulated hand, waving slowly, a puppet's farewell. This time I didn't hesitate. I sprinted, fueled by pure terror, until I reached my battered sedan. The engine coughed, then roared to life, tires spitting gravel as I fled the accursed grounds. A glance in the rearview mirror framed the Ferris wheel against the bruised pre-dawn sky. For an instant, I swore I saw other shapes stirring in the gondolas. I drove directly to the town precinct, hands still vibrating, spilling the disjointed nightmare to officers whose weary patience barely masked their disbelief. They exchanged glances, the universal shorthand for drunk or delusional. "We'll dispatch a unit, sir," one offered, his tone promising little more than a cursory check. How could I make them grasp the impossible truth? Yesterday I'd have dismissed such a tale myself. I went home, bolted the door, checked the windows, flinched at every creak of the old house. Sleep was a distant country. Behind my eyelids, only glowing orbs and impossible smiles resided. The next morning, I phoned dispatch. Told them I wouldn't be returning. No wage could justify another night in that place. Weeks bled into a month. Silence from the park. No reports of vandalism, no confirmation of my frantic story. Life resumed its mundane rhythm, and I began constructing fragile barricades of rationalization. Fatigue, shadows, an overwrought mind playing tricks in the dark. Perhaps it had all been a stress-induced phantasm. Then folded in the local gazette, Jubilee Gardens poised for grand relaunch. Buzzwords about refurbishment and family fun filled the column. But it was the accompanying photograph that stopped my breath. Beaming executives posed before the newly painted spook spire. And there, peering from an upper window, obscured but undeniable, was a sliver of a face. Painted white, with a red slash of a smile that seemed impossibly, terrifyingly wide. In that instant, the fragile peace shattered. It hadn't ended. Whatever unholy sentience had stirred within the decaying heart of Jubilee Gardens, whatever malice animated those plastic shells, it remained, waiting, watching. And soon, the gates would swing wide, welcoming unsuspecting crowds. I wanted to shout warnings from the rooftops, But who listens to the ravings of a disgraced night watchman? They'd call it trauma, delusion. So I exist now in the chilling certainty of what's coming, haunted by the knowledge that others will soon wander into that manufactured fun fair, unaware that the real show begins after dark. Because at Jubilee Gardens, the laughter never truly stops, and the nightmare has only just begun. A tremor ran through the headlights, a brief stutter against the oppressive dark, before they surrendered entirely, plunging our world into profound blackness. The engine gave a final shuddering cough, and the car coasted, ghost-like, to a halt on the serpentine ribbon of asphalt. My hand turned the key. The ignition answered with only a hollow, defeated click. Utterly, irrevocably stranded. "This isn't right," Clara whispered beside me, her voice stretched thin, a wire humming with frustration. In the meager moonlight that filtered, lace-like, through the dense canopy overhead, her form was a mere silhouette edged in silver. I summoned my phone, already anticipating the void. No bars, no connection. A digital desert. Miles we were from any semblance of town, swallowed by an encroaching forest. The GPS, our electronic guide, had turned traitor an hour prior, luring us down this forgotten capillary of road, absent from any map we possessed. "Leo, what are we meant to do?" The question quivered, laced now with the first threads of panic. My gaze strained against the windshield, attempting to penetrate the velvet depths. Then a flicker. Off to the right, nestled within the trees. A faint, solitary luminescence. "Look," I murmured, pointing. "A light. A house, maybe? Someone might have a telephone." Clara drew back, a shadow of unease. "I don't know, Leo. Just walking up to a strange door, out here, in the dead of night? It feels fraught." Her apprehension was a palpable thing, yet our choices were starkly limited. "It's that," I countered softly, "or we become fixtures in this car, praying for a phantom vehicle on a road that seems utterly forsaken." A sigh escaped her, heavy with resignation. "All right, but we tread carefully, very carefully." Retrieving flashlights from the glove compartment, feeble swords against the night, we eased out of the car's metal shell. The air met us cool and damp, thick with the perfume of pine resin and sodden earth. Our shoes crunched on the unseen gravel path leading towards the distant glow. Closer now, the light resolved into the warm windows of a substantial farmhouse. It stood weathered and ancient, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, its porch sagging under the weight of years and neglect. Yet the light spilling forth promised warmth, sanctuary. We reached the front door, my knuckles poised to rap against the wood. Before they could connect, the portal swung inward, revealing a man, tall and gaunt, his hair a thinning gray, his eyes sunk deep in shadowed sockets. "Well now," he rasped, the sound like dry leaves skittering over stone, though not entirely unkind. "What finds you folks wandering these parts so late?" I recounted our mechanical failure, the dead engine, the useless phone. A slow, sympathetic smile creased his weathered face. Automotive trouble, is it? A bitter pill, that. Name's Silas. Best come inside, out of the damp. We'll see about finding you some assistance. Clara's fingers tightened on my hand, a silent plea for caution, but Silas's offered welcome, coupled with the tangible warmth radiating from the house's interior, proved too potent a lure to refuse. We stepped across the threshold into a space astonishingly burdened with possessions. Every flat surface groaned under a chaotic accumulation of knickknacks, yellowed newspapers, gears, and coils of wire. The air hung heavy, saturated with the scent of stale tobacco and another sharper aroma. Something metallic, unplaceable. "Agnes!" Silas bellowed towards the back of the house. "We've got visitors!" From a doorway I presumed led to the kitchen emerged a woman, short and rounded, her gray hair escaping its pins in a frizzy halo. She wiped her hands on a stained apron, offering a wide smile that didn't quite illuminate her eyes. Oh, my stars! Company at this hour. Isn't that a turn-up? Her voice was high-pitched, reedy. You poor souls must be chilled to the bone. Settle yourselves in the parlor while I fetch some hot tea. Before objections could form, Agnes steered us into a cramped living room dominated by a vast, threadbare sofa. The walls were a gallery of faded photographs, the subjects staring out with flat, vacant eyes. Silas sank into a deeply worn armchair opposite us. "So, where were you aiming for tonight?" I explained our journey to visit Clara's parents, keeping the details vague. As I spoke, I registered Silas's eyes, darting between us, assessing, weighing. Agnes bustled back in, bearing a tray laden with mismatched cups and a plate of cookies. Setting it down, the strange chemical tang I'd noticed earlier intensified briefly. "Right then," Silas said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "That vehicle of yours. I've got a knack for engines. Come morning light, I'll take a proper look. Too murky now, and these backwoods paths aren't forgiving after dark." Clara and I exchanged a loaded glance. The prospect of spending the night under this roof prickled my skin with unease. Yet the alternative, stumbling back to the inert car through the black woods, held even less appeal. "That's extraordinarily generous," Clara offered, her tone carefully measured. "But we wouldn't dream of imposing. If perhaps we could just borrow your telephone, call for a tow service." "Ah, the phone line," Agnes interjected swiftly, her smile unwavering. "Been out for days, hasn't it, Silas? Service is dreadful out this way. But you mustn't fret. We've ample space. The guest room upstairs is all ready." As she spoke, my eyes caught a dark, irregular stain blooming on her apron. It looked disconcertingly fresh, almost crimson in the dim lamplight. Silas must have tracked my gaze. He shifted abruptly, standing and partially blocking my view of his wife. "Well, that settles it," he declared with forced heartiness. "You'll stay the night. We'll tackle the car come sunrise. Now, who's hungry?" Agnes makes a stew that'll put the warmth back in you. The mention of food triggered a sharp pang in my stomach. Lunch felt a lifetime ago. Despite the burgeoning disquiet, I heard myself agree. As we followed them towards what must be the dining room, I leaned close to Clara. "Something isn't right here," I whispered. She gave the smallest nod, her eyes dark with shared apprehension. "I feel it too, but what else can we do? We endure the night, leave at the first light." The dining room mirrored the house's cluttered state. Mismatched crockery and tarnished silver lay upon the table. Agnes ladled out a thick, dark stew whose aroma, surprisingly, was rich and savory. While we ate, Silas spun tales of the farm, the woods, his knowledge of the surrounding wilderness unnervingly intimate as he described hidden hollows and long-forgotten trails. "You know," he mused, his eyes catching the candlelight with a peculiar glint. "Folks have vanished out here before. Hikers off the path, lost campers, even the odd traveler who took a wrong turn." Beside me, I felt Clara tense. Silas's tone was conversational, almost jovial, yet beneath it pulsed an unsettling current, warning or perhaps threat. Agnes let out a nervous little laugh. "Oh, Silas, don't you go frightening our guests with your morbid tales. They look fair worn out. I reckon they'd prefer their beds." As if summoned by her words, a profound lethargy washed over me. My limbs turned to lead, my eyelids gained immense weight. Glancing at Clara, I saw her struggling too, her head dipping forward. Alarm bells clanged faintly in the fog descending upon my mind. I tried to push back my chair, to stand, but my legs refused to obey. Think we should turn in," I managed, the words thick on my tongue. Silas's smile stretched, revealing more teeth than seemed necessary. "But of course, naturally. Agnes, dear, why don't you show our weary travelers to their room?" The ascent of the staircase became a hazy, stumbling affair. I dimly recall Agnes's incessant, reedy chatter, guiding us into a small, musty bedroom furnished with a single, narrow bed. The moment she withdrew, closing the door behind her, Clara and I collapsed onto the thin mattress, too profoundly drugged, too utterly exhausted to resist the encroaching oblivion. Hours later, or perhaps minutes, time had lost its mooring. I jolted awake, my skull throbbing. Pitch darkness enveloped me. For a disoriented second, I grasped for context, then memory flooded back. The dead car, the isolated farmhouse, Silas and Agnes. Fumbling for my phone, its screen cast a ghostly pallor. 3:17 a.m. Beside me, Clara slept deeply, her breath a steady rhythm in the silence. Then I heard it. Voices, muffled, indistinct, yet undeniably rising from somewhere below. Straining my ears, I caught fragments drifting up through the old floorboards. Prime condition. Fetch a handsome price. Need to act before dawn. A glacial chill seeped into my veins as the meaning coalesced. This wasn't about fixing our car. We had to escape. Now. I shook Clara, pressing a hand gently over her mouth to stifle the gasp that sprang to her lips. "We have to leave," I whispered, urgency sharpening my voice. "Something is terribly wrong." Her eyes flew open, wide with dawning terror. She nodded. We slid from the bed, moving with excruciating care, each creak of the ancient floorboards echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. The hallway stretched before us, a corridor of shadows. The low murmur of voices continued from downstairs. We crept towards the staircase, pausing, listening, descending one agonizing step at a time. Near the bottom, a sliver of light bled from beneath a closed door. The cellar, I realized with a fresh wave of dread. We were mere feet from the front door when a floorboard beneath my weight let out a long, protesting groan. The voices from the cellar ceased abruptly. "Hear that?" Silas's voice, stripped of all warmth, now sharp with suspicion. Clara and I didn't hesitate. We lunged for the door, fingers scrabbling frantically with the unfamiliar lock. Behind us, the cellar door scraped open, followed by the thud of heavy, rapid footsteps. We burst out into the cool, damp night, running blindly down the overgrown track towards the road. The sound of Silas shouting unintelligibly lost beneath the frantic drumming of our own hearts. We ran, lungs burning, legs screaming, never daring a backward glance. Gasping, sides aching, we finally stumbled to a halt back on the road, beside the dark shape of our car. Miraculously, impossibly, when I turned the key, the engine caught, roared to life on the first try. We peeled away, tires spitting gravel, leaving the menacing silhouette of the farmhouse and its sinister inhabitants receding rapidly in the rear-view mirror. The feeling of a narrowly averted catastrophe, something far worse than being merely stranded, clung to me like the damp night air. Silence reigned in the car for a long time. The only sound the hum of the engine eating up the miles, both of us adrift in the turbulent wake of what had happened. Only when the distant, welcoming glow of the next town appeared on the horizon did Clara finally speak, her voice still trembling. "Leo," she breathed. What do you think they were planning to do?" I shook my head, unwilling to give voice to the monstrous possibilities churning in my own mind. "I don't know, Clara, and I don't want to. Let's just thank whatever stars are watching that we're out." Pulling into the bright, fluorescent sanctuary of a gas station, surrounded by the mundane, comforting architecture of civilization, I made a silent, fervent vow. Regardless of the detour's length, irrespective of the inconvenience, never again would we seek refuge with unknown faces on a dark, deserted road. Friday bled into Saturday somewhere on a ribbon of asphalt flung across the Texas void, 2 hours shy of Houston's sprawl. A work meeting in some half-forgotten town had stretched thin, snapping near midnight, leaving Alara adrift in her car, consciousness fraying. Sleep beckoned, a siren song promising oblivion until noon, but home was still a distant shore. The highway unfurled, a desolate expanse swallowed by night. Only her headlamps carved a fleeting reality from the gloom, painting yellow dashes on the tarmac, occasionally snagging on a skeletal sign. Static hissed from the radio, a flimsy companion against the crushing silence of the middle of nowhere. An hour dissolved into the hypnotic rhythm of the drive before twin stars bloomed in her rear-view mirror. Headlights, fierce and insistent, bore down through the darkness. Just another night owl homeward bound, she reasoned initially, a flicker of camaraderie in the shared solitude. But the approaching vehicle refused the courtesy of passing. It latched onto her bumper, a predator settling in her wake, its high beam searing her eyes through the mirror. Elara nudged her speed upward. The shadow mirrored her acceleration, clinging with unnerving proximity. Irritation prickled. A gentle tap on the brakes, a silent plea to back off. No response. The pursuing car remained a featureless silhouette, a dark sedan of indeterminate make, its driver obscured by the blinding glare. A slow breath, an attempt to leash the rising disquiet. Maybe just fatigue clouding their judgment, she told herself. Maybe they hadn't grasped their proximity. Mile after mile bled away under the twin gazes in her mirror. The hunter stayed locked on. Frustration curdled into a colder emotion, a thread of genuine unease weaving through her exhaustion. The emptiness of the road pressed in. No other vehicles, no welcoming exits for an eternity. Just Elara, this silent pursuer, and the unspooling blacktop. Enough. The decision solidified. A roadside rest area materialized on the right, a lonely concrete island with skeletal picnic tables and a squat brick outhouse. A brief sanctuary. She'd pull off, let this persistent shadow sweep past, grant herself a few minutes reprieve before rejoining the asphalt river. Her indicator blinked, a fragile pulse in the dark, as she decelerated towards the pull-off. But the following car slowed in perfect synchrony, its headlights unwavering. A jolt, sharp and cold. Fear. Why wouldn't they pass? She swung into the rest area, tires crunching softly on the neglected pavement, parking near the tables, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She waited, eyes fixed on the entrance, bracing for the car to roar past and vanish down the highway. It didn't. Instead, it turned in, coasting to a stop several spaces away, angled slightly towards her. The engine idled, a low thrum beneath the cicada-lease silence, its headlights carving long, distorted shadows across the deserted space. Tinted windows offered no clue, reflecting only the stark scene. Elara fumbled for composure, her breath catching. Coincidence, she insisted silently. Maybe they were disoriented, needed a pause just like her. Her phone lay inert on the passenger seat. Calling someone felt like an overreaction, an admission of panic. The dashboard clock glowed. 12:45 a.m. Patience. Just wait. Stay locked inside. They would leave. Minutes stretched taut. Then the driver's door of the sedan swung open. A figure emerged, tall, clad in dark attire, face lost in the manufactured twilight cast by his own vehicle. He stood beside his car, utterly still, oriented towards her, watching. Panic surged, a dizzying wave. Her hands trembled against the wheel. Stay or flee? The figure's immobility was magnetic, paralyzing. He began to walk towards her car. The steps were measured, deliberate, each footfall echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Elara's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat audible in her own ears. Her fingers scrabbled for the lock button, the click loud in the confined space. A desperate scan of the surroundings confirmed her isolation. Nowhere to run, no one to witness, just Ilara, her metal shell, and the approaching stranger. He reached her window, halting mere inches away. He leaned down, his features still stubbornly obscured by shadow. His presence was a palpable weight. She couldn't discern his eyes, read no expression, yet felt his gaze, an unnerving, vacant pressure. Cranking the window down a sliver, her voice emerged as a thin tremor. "Can I help you?" Silence answered, punctuated only by the faint, steady sound of his breathing. She swallowed, forcing strength into her voice. "Do you need something?" A whisper, barely disturbing the air. He inclined his head fractionally closer, his face nearly touching the glass. For the first time, his eyes registered, or rather, the chilling lack within them. They were flat, cold pools reflecting nothing. Abyssal. "I need a ride," he stated, the words toneless, utterly devoid of inflection. Ice traced a path down Ilara's spine. "I'm sorry," she stammered, the words clumsy. I can't." He didn't shift, didn't react, just held her captive with that empty stare. The fear in her gut tightened into a cold, dense knot. Run. The imperative screamed in her mind, but her limbs felt leaden, pinned by his proximity. "Please," he repeated, the sound barely louder than his breath. "I need a ride." Ilara shook her head, her grip on the wheel a death lock. I'm sorry, I have to go." The key turned, the engine catching with a startled roar. She slammed the gear stick into reverse, tires spitting gravel as she shot backwards, away from the figure. A glance at the rear-view mirror showed him standing exactly where she'd left him, motionless, a dark statue watching her escape. Back on the highway, adrenaline surged, heart a wild bird in her chest. What had that been? Why the pursuit? The need for distance was overwhelming, a primal urge to put miles between herself and that desolate rest stop. For several minutes, the mirror reflected only receding darkness. She watched it obsessively, half expecting those lights to reappear. Gradually, the frantic rhythm of her heart began to slow. It was over. He was gone. Then pinpricks of light materialized far behind her, growing rapidly, closing the distance with predatory speed. A fresh wave of terror washed over her, cold and sickening. Her hands shook violently on the wheel. She pressed the accelerator, urging her car faster, but the lights gained relentlessly. Within moments, they were there again, filling her mirror, flooding the cabin with harsh, invasive brilliance. Impossible to see the driver, impossible to know for sure, yet a certainty settled deep in her bones. It was him. She floored the pedal, the engine screaming in protest as the speedometer needle climbed. 80, 90. Still the lights clung to her bumper, an inescapable phantom. Escape seemed impossible on this straight, empty stretch. Pull over? Try to outmaneuver him? The twin beams in the mirror mocked the thought. A constant, terrifying presence. An exit sign flashed ahead. a minor road peeling off into deeper darkness. A chance. Ilara wrenched the wheel, taking the ramp far too fast, tires squealing in protest. She plunged onto the narrow side road, heart pounding, praying the maneuver had broken the pursuit. A frantic check of the mirror. Empty. The blinding lights were gone. She pulled onto the shoulder, cutting the engine, the sudden silence deafening. Gasping for breath, hands trembling uncontrollably, she sat enveloped in darkness. The road behind her remained utterly black, utterly still. A fragile tendril of relief began to unfurl. And in that profound quiet, she heard it. A soft, distinct tap from the back seat. She froze, every muscle locking, the relief instantly vaporizing, replaced by ice water dread. Don't look. Don't turn around. But the impulse was irresistible, a horrific magnetic pull. Slowly, mechanically, she twisted in her seat, glancing over her shoulder. He was there, filling the back seat, his face inches from hers, those same empty eyes boring into her. "I told you," he whispered, his voice a cold, hollow rasp in the suffocating confines of the car. "I need a ride." The symphony of a dwelling, slamming doors, rattling pipes, the neighbor's bronchial percussion, had always been mere auditory wallpaper to me, unnoticed until silence fell. But this edifice, it breathed differently. The realization dawned the very day I arrived, wrestling a cumbersome carton down the passage. Behind me, a dry susurrus, like sandpaper on stone. Another resident, I presumed, perhaps grappling with their own belongings. A turn revealed nothing but the corridor, bleached beige by time, overseen by a single jaundiced bulb. I dismissed it, resuming my awkward shuffle. Then it recurred, that identical scraping, precisely a second after my own carton ceased its movement. Not concurrent, but delayed. A lag. Fatigue gnawed at me, muscles protesting the day's exertions. I shrugged again, intent on ignoring it. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, and each protest seemed to rebound, tardy and distorted, as if the sound waves themselves were wading through molasses. Peculiar yet unpacking demanded my focus amidst the chaos of resettlement. An aroma of desiccated timber and stagnant air clung to the place. Walls thick as secrets, floors laid down when the century was young, their hardwood planks worn smooth and complaining underfoot. My first week unfolded within the confines of my rooms, besieged by the anxieties of a new position and the looming architecture of unpacked boxes. Outside my door, the corridor remained perpetually twilit, footfalls rare intrusions, and those few steps never sounded quite right, echoed with an unnerving temporal displacement, a stutter in the building's acoustic memory. The landlord, Silas, had muttered about the building's age, its character, but neglected to mention these lagging reverberations. One twilight, curiosity hardening into resolve, I stood in the hallway and brought my heel down hard, a definitive punctuation mark in the silence. I waited. The reply came, lagging by that now familiar second, yet it wasn't a sharp report. It was softer, almost aspirated, like a phantom attempting the sound with breath alone. A shiver traced the vertebrae of my neck. My gaze drifted over the walls, noting the crazed paint, the hairline fractures spidering near the ceiling cornice, all rendered pallid by the weak light. Was I succumbing to fancy? I tensed, listening. Again the stomp. Again the deferred echo, this time subtly off-key, a hushed, inaccurate mimicry. My chest constricted, my own pulse hammered against my ribs. It had to be an anomaly of the architecture, I reasoned desperately. Some trick of the corridor's geometry warping sound. Retreating inside, I secured the door, willing the unease away. Sleep, however, proved elusive that night. Each shift of weight on the mattress seemed to provoke a faint, trailing creak from the hallway, a sound perpetually catching up. Imagination, surely. The following morning, heading out, my own departing footsteps trailed me, echoed. Expected in such an old structure, yes, but the interval was wrong. Not overlapping, but the ghost of each footfall arriving just as the next real one landed. It spurred me to quicken my pace. At the elevator bank, I paused, tapping my foot once, deliberately. After the tap ceased, a soft, stretched thwack answered from the empty space. I stared at the walls, clad in ancient, nicotine-yellowed paper. A prickling heat rose on my skin, the distinct sensation of being observed. The lift sighed open, its doors closing like a shutter, severing the connection to the corridor's strangeness. For a time, denial served. Work provided distraction. The office building held no such auditory quirks. The anomaly was rooted here, not within me. Yet each evening's return resurrected the phenomenon. The walk down that passage, the spectral footfalls dogging my heels, second late. Sometimes faint, sometimes unnervingly proximate, as if something intangible breathed just over my shoulder. I developed a habit of whirling around abruptly, hoping to expose a prankster, only to confront the same vacant, dim hallway. Nearly a fortnight in, I staged an experiment within my living room. Windows sealed, appliances silenced, I sought absolute quiet. Standing centrally, I clapped my hands thrice, sharp, precise. The first clap reverberated normally, a crisp reflection off plaster. The second, likewise. But the third echo, it was different. It returned as a muffled whisper, indistinct, yet undeniably vocalic, like a hushed shh breathed from an adjacent room. Gooseflesh erupted along my arms. My gaze swept the walls, the ceiling. My throat felt scraped raw. Again, clap, clap, clap. The initial pair, standard echoes. The third, that same distorted reply, as if the building attempted replication but fumbled the execution. Its memory corrupted. The tightness revisited my chest, sweat gathering at my temples. Enough clapping. I flooded the room with the television's noise, a bulwark against the silence. Night brought new sounds, low murmurs from the corridor, distinct from the groaning pipes. Pressing my ear to the door's cool wood, I detected something akin to speech, yet structured in no language I knew. Syllables punctuated by brief lacunae, possessing an almost liturgical cadence. A knot formed in my stomach. Informed Silas? What could I articulate? That the hallway echoed incorrectly and sometimes seemed to confer? I held my silence, attributing it to antiquated ventilation or the gurgle of water through ancient conduits. One night, The need for evidence became imperative. Though hardly tech-savvy, I retrieved my phone, activated its voice recorder, and placed it like a sentinel just outside my threshold. Retreating inside, I left the door slightly ajar, waiting in the encompassing darkness, the refrigerator's low hum the only anchor. My heart thudded a frantic rhythm. Occasional scuffles or scratches defied localization. After perhaps 10 minutes, I retrieved the device. Locking the door firmly, I switched on a dim lamp and listened. Initially, only the building's ambient sighs, faint hums, the whisper of a draft. Then nestled between them, a breath, sharp, indrawn, followed by faint, rhythmic tapping, and then chillingly a warped facsimile of my own voice. I hadn't spoken, yet there it was, my intonation mangled, the words unintelligible, slurry. A cold sweat beaded on my skin. The phone felt suddenly alien in my trembling grasp. I replayed the segment repeatedly, anxiety mounting with each pass. Isolated syllables surfaced. Belonging to no tongue, I recognized. It sounded like a corrupted fragment of something I might have uttered earlier, twisted beyond recognition. My hands shook. I deleted the file, visceral revulsion overriding the need for proof. A decision immediately tinged with regret. My behavior began to shift subtly thereafter. Excursions dwindled. Takeout replaced grocery runs. Rugs unfurled across the complaining floorboards, futile mufflers against the inevitable, lagging footfall that still haunted the corridor. It seemed worse, somehow. The passage relayed my steps with that bizarre delay. Sometimes half a second, sometimes the full, pregnant pause. I found myself counting mentally. Step 1001. Echo. The mismatch grated, inducing headaches. I attempted communication with a neighbor, Mr. Finch, a middle-aged man residing across the hall. He cracked the door, a sliver of suspicion in the dimness, one eye glinting. Had he, I inquired, ever noticed peculiar echoes? His stare was opaque. Old plumbing, old walls, he conceded. Plenty of creaks and groans, but nothing extraordinary. Then, citing some pressing matter, he shut the door. His reaction felt deliberately obtuse, a refusal to engage. Standing alone in the hallway's gloom, my pulse hammered in my ears. I retreated, locked my door, and drowned the ensuing tension in music. Several nights later, I surfaced abruptly from sleep into profound darkness, ears ringing with silence. I realized I was holding my breath. Then a delicate tapping commenced from somewhere overhead, rhythmic, like a pencil point against the ceiling plaster. I listened, motionless, praying for it to cease. It did, only to be replaced by what sounded unmistakably like my own voice. I froze, muffled yet the pitch, the cadence, mine. It repeated a short sequence of sounds, incomprehensible but intimately familiar in its delivery. My scalp tightened, the voice frayed at the edges, dissolving into a soft hiss. My limbs felt frigid, my head pulsed with a dull ache. The urge to scream, to rail against the walls, surged, but fear paralyzed me. Would it answer? I dared not provoke whatever entity was learning my sound. I lay rigid, breathing shallowly, staring into the void until the first hint of dawn bled through the window. Morning arrived, and I moved through the rituals of showering and coffee-making automatically, thoughts scattering like startled birds. There was no escape. The lease held me fast. Funds for another move were non-existent. I spent the day adrift, nursing a single coffee in a bustling cafe, delaying my return until the cusp of midnight, hoping exhaustion would grant oblivion. But the moment I entered the building, the oppressive weight of the echo descended. The lobby, stark under a flickering fluorescent tube, felt cavernous and watchful. Down the corridor to the elevator, I counted my steps, hearing each one duplicated a second later. My mouth was dust, fingers clenched white around my keys. I ascended, steeling myself. The elevator doors parted onto absolute black. The hallway light outside my apartment was extinguished. My phone's flashlight beam sliced through the oppressive dark as I stepped out. Instantly, my footfall echoed, a beat behind. I spun, sweeping the light across the void. Nothing but worn textures, peeling paint. I hurried towards my door, heart battering my ribs. The echo of my final steps arrived after. I'd already stopped moving. It felt pursued, copied in slow motion. Key jammed, turned, door flung open. I plunged inside, slamming it shut, bolts thrown. I stood panting in the darkness, listening. A beat of silence. Then, through the solid wood, a final whispered footfall. A soft thump, as if the corridor itself had taken one last, catching up step. Sweat slicked my forehead. I found the light switch, leaning heavily against the wall, stomach churning, forcing deep, calming breaths. That night, the building felt sentient. Floorboards groaned, pipes hissed with unusual vehemence. Yet beneath these familiar protests of age, the delayed echo persisted, a phantom counterpoint. I removed shoes, socks, hoping bare feet might pass unnoticed. Even then, the soft squeak of board against board found its lagging reply. My arm trembled as I checked my phone. Nearly 1 a.m. Eyes burning with fatigue, I collapsed into bed, fully clothed, craving only the escape of sleep. Turning off the light, I lay staring at the unseen ceiling, trying to modulate my breathing, terrified the building would mimic that too. After minutes stretched taut, the syllables returned, those fragments from the recording, hushed yet clear in their pattern, leaching through the plaster, originating from the walls, the corridor, perhaps the adjacent void. My pulse surged, every muscle clenched. The desire to scream, to hammer the walls, was a physical force, yet I remained inert, breathing measuredly. The whispered sequence persisted for a minute, then dissolved. The building settled back into its nocturnal rhythm. Creaks, hums, the snap of cooling timber. I waited, consciously relaxing my body inch by inch. Eventually, eyelids heavy, I drifted into a shallow, uneasy doze. Morning brought quietude, daylight, traffic sounds, the movements of neighbors. These diluted the phenomenon. But the night's experiences remained indelible. Was it stress? An overactive imagination? The conviction held firm. Something in this structure captured sounds, stored them, replayed them with flawed, unsettling fidelity. It was learning. In the solitary quiet, I sensed it, a presence lingering just beyond the periphery of my actions. How long can I endure this? Months remain on the lease, and explaining this, how? Without proof, without the deleted recording, it sounds like madness. Yet I know what I hear. This is no quirk of acoustics, no simple reverberation. It feels directed, intimate, as if the building itself possesses a nascent consciousness, weaving a voice from the threads of my own sounds. It's out of sync, distorted, clumsy, but it tries. And late at night, when darkness reigns and the corridors lie still, it's there, close behind, mimicking my every move. Off by a beat, practicing, perfecting, perhaps, the moment it steps fully into sync. My own bedroom, a space I once considered inviolate, now feels tainted. The genesis of this unease was subtle. A discoloration marring the wall beside my bed. An umber blotch I initially dismissed as damp, creeping through old plaster. Perhaps the ghost of a long-forgotten leak. Benign, I thought. Until the voices began. Not voices precisely, but a choral susurrus, faint as thought, seeming to emanate directly from that shadowed patch. A low, meandering threnody. Delusion, I told myself at first. Wishful thinking for the silence to break, maybe. But the sound persisted. Undeniable. My flesh prickled, tightening across my bones the first time I pressed my ear to the cool plaster and confirmed the subterranean choir. A secret too bizarre, too fragile to share. Who would believe such a thing? Now the weight of it settles in my chest whenever that melody surfaces in my mind. A pressure building, growing heavier with each passing day. Silas, that's my name. 32 years circling the sun, inhabiting this compact living unit alone. It lacks grandeur, certainly, but suffices. A modest living space flows into a galley kitchen barely worthy of the name. The bathroom is a cramped necessity. The bedroom, just spacious enough to accommodate a double bed, feels almost monastic. Walls wear a uniform, uninspired white, save for that single anomalous stain near the headboard. An old watermark I'd assumed upon first noticing it. Unworthy of complaint to a landlord, notoriously inert, unless faced with outright catastrophe. Then weeks ago, deep in the nocturnal stillness, a delicate tune surfaced. I lifted my head, the pillow rustling softly, and strained to listen. Faint, yes, like wind sighing through an unseen fissure, yet possessed of an undeniable structure. Music. Drawn by the sound, I traced it to the wall directly behind my head. Leaning in, I discerned a tapestry of low voices, interwoven in some alien harmony, humming syllables that defied comprehension. Flicking on the lamp illuminated the familiar wall. The sepia bruise remained, perhaps marginally larger, darker, though certainty eluded me. No visible breach, no crack marred the surface. My palm, pressed flat against it, registered a distinct coolness compared to the surrounding plaster. I listened again, intently, but the choir had retreated into silence. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow, haunted by the echo of that hum. Morning arrived late, pulling me into the frantic rhythm of departure for work. The day's obligations largely eclipsed the nocturnal strangeness. Yet returning that evening, curiosity flared anew. Entering the bedroom, I placed my ear against the wall, waiting in the quiet. Nothing. Then, just as self-consciousness began to prickle, the faint threnody returned. The same slow, deliberate cadence. The voices, though hushed, were distinct entities melding into one. An impulse seized me. Record it. Holding my breath, I pressed my phone flush against the plaster. Playback yielded little more than a low, indistinct rumble, a ghost in the machine. My phone's microphone, inadequate for the task, had captured only a frustrating whisper. Again and again I listened, straining, amplifying the signal through headphones. There, a distorted echo of the layered voices, distant, hollow. A sharp tension knotted my neck and shoulders. Something in that garbled recording felt deeply wrong. For days, I practiced avoidance. Routine became my shield. My job, technical support for some small firm, offered the comfort of monotony, if not fulfillment. Evenings dissolved into television static or the turning of pages. But the stain persisted, a silent sentinel drawing my gaze, especially as darkness fell. I began to notice a correlation. Prolonged listening to the hum seemed to accelerate my pulse, a response somewhere between fear and physiological stress. And the stain itself, it seemed mutable. One night I could have sworn I saw its surface ripple subtly as the humming swelled in volume. I recoiled, a gasp escaping me, breath catching in my throat. I fled the room, heart hammering, until the tremor subsided. Driven by a gnawing compulsion, I started transcribing fragments of the melody into a small notebook, approximating pitches, capturing the shape of the tune. A crude notation, hampered by my lack of musical training and the difficulty of isolating the interwoven vocal lines. Sometimes I'd hum a captured phrase aloud, testing its accuracy. Each time a familiar tightness constricted my chest, a feeling of being unable to draw a full breath, accompanied by a peculiar churning low in my gut, as if the melody itself were drawing something vital from me. Still I persisted, gripped by the urge to decipher it, to solve this unsettling puzzle, despite the anxiety it provoked. One evening, seated before my dusty keyboard, a relic from adolescence, I attempted to stitch together a longer sequence from my notes. Fingers stumbled, hitting dissonant chords, but eventually a phrase emerged that resonated with the memory of the Walls' song. The instant I played it correctly, a sharp pressure bloomed behind my eyes, blurring my vision momentarily. My hands began to tremble, scattering notes like frightened birds. Cursing softly, I stopped. A glance over my shoulder confirmed my fear, or perhaps my paranoia. The stain on the wall appeared larger. Not demonstrably, perhaps not measurably, but subjectively, undeniably darker, its edges seeming to creep further across the plaster. I rose stiffly, retreated to the kitchen and poured a glass of water with unsteady hands, cool sweat beading at my temples. Sleep offered little respite that night. The melody became an internal loop, relentless. My dreams were formless, yet oppressive. Variations of me standing before the stained wall, enveloped by the humming of unseen singers. I woke feeling depleted, hollowed out. Dragging myself from bed, I confronted the stain, vaster now in my memory than reality perhaps allowed, and vowed to ignore it. Showered, dressed, I forced myself into the semblance of a normal day. But the apartment's silence felt thick, charged. Leaving for work offered a temporary reprieve, the presence of others a thin balm. Yet even there, fragments of the tune surfaced unbidden, hummed beneath my breath. A colleague inquired about the melody. I feigned ignorance, offered a dismissive laugh that felt brittle in my own ears. Returning home that evening felt like approaching a precipice. The hallway light remained stubbornly defunct, forcing me to fumble with the lock in the gloom. Inside, flipping the switch banished the shadows, but not the distinct chill permeating the air. The landlord meddling with the heating again, I hoped, though doubt lingered. I dropped my bag, the thud echoing slightly. Each step towards the bedroom amplified the pounding in my chest. The moment I crossed the threshold, the humming met me, louder now, undeniably present. I froze, staring at the wall. My chest tightened. Switching on the bedside lamp revealed the stain looking engorged, like saturated cloth about to tear. Its edges frayed outwards, the center a near black void. Swallowing against a dry throat, I edged closer. The humming held steady, a low, resonant drone. With forced resolve, I touched the wall. Ice cold. A tingling vibrated up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if burned. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Heartbeats thudded against my ribs. I retreated to the living area couch, sinking into its worn cushions. I sat there for a long time, trying to regain equilibrium, one leg jiggling uncontrollably, hands rubbing together as if to generate warmth. The urge to call someone, anyone, warred with profound embarrassment. "Hi, there's a singing stain in my bedroom?" Preposterous. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, then set it down again, feeling utterly isolated. Hunger eventually drove me to prepare a bleak microwave meal. Television offered distraction, but the humming bled through the thin walls during quiet moments, a persistent undertone that kept my nerves frayed. After eating, drawn by that same perilous curiosity, I gathered my notebook. Had to understand. Some part of me clung to the desperate hope that comprehension offered control, perhaps even cessation. But as I focused on the transcribed notes, my vision swam. A heavy ache pulsed behind my eyes, migrating to throb in my temples. I pushed through the discomfort, softly humming a longer passage, pausing to gasp for air against the crushing weight on my chest. Rising, I paced the small living area, thoughts racing, glancing repeatedly at the dark maw of the bedroom doorway, half expecting something. The tension remained, a solid knot between my shoulder blades. Sleep on the couch seemed the only viable option. Extinguishing the lights, I lay down, the scratchy upholstery and sagging cushions offering little comfort. The humming, though muffled, remained a constant presence in my awareness. A fine tremor persisted in my hands. Sleep, when it came, was less a surrender than an utter collapse from exhaustion. Hours later, I jolted awake, bathed in sweat. The humming filled the apartment, louder than it had ever been. A glance at my phone. 3 a.m. My heart hammered against my ribs. Drawn by an awful gravity, I walked to the bedroom doorway. The sound didn't diminish. Stepping inside, the stain seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. I fumbled for the lamp switch. A low vibration resonated through the floorboards beneath my bare feet. Hand trembling, I reached out again to touch the wall. Cold, yes, but beneath my palm, a definite, rhythmic movement. Nausea surged. I stumbled back, collapsing onto the edge of the bed, staring at the malignant bloom on the wall. Paint over it? A futile gesture, I knew instinctively. The melody shifted subtly, climbing in pitch before descending again into its drone. Covering my ears did nothing. The sound permeated bone, resonated within my skull. Panic tightened its icy grip. My breath came in ragged gasps. The frantic pounding of my pulse convinced me I might actually pass out. Something is coming through. The thought was stark, terrifying. I scrambled out, snatching my phone from the couch. Calling the landlord at this hour was pointless. Pacing the kitchen, A frantic energy possessed me. The humming vibrated through everything now. The floor, the countertops, the very air. Flee. But where? Work loomed in a few hours. Funds were scarce. A hotel was an impossibility. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. Pale, hollow-eyed, hair askew, shirt clinging damply. Deep breaths. Control. Forcing myself back to the bedroom felt like wading into deep water. Sitting on the bed again, I tried to anchor myself to the mundane. The cluttered nightstand, the wrinkled bedspread, socks discarded on the floor, the dim overhead light casting long shadows, dust motes dancing in the stagnant air, and the stain, dark, damp-looking, inescapable, the humming, a constant pressure. My head throbbed in time with the sound. Opening the notebook, I stared at the cryptic notation. Patterns began to emerge, connections I hadn't seen before. A terrible logic asserted itself. Against every instinct screaming retreat, I began to hum the entire sequence as I understood it. A twisting agony spread through my chest. Jaw clenched, sweat prickling my forehead, I pushed onward. The stain seemed to contract, its edges curling inward like scorched paper. A racking cough interrupted me, nearly dislodging the notebook from my grasp. My lungs burned. I stopped, gasping, vision tilting. Lying back on the bed, the world slowly righted itself. The humming receded slightly, but its presence remained. Clarity arrived, cold and sharp. The more I engaged with the melody, the more I deciphered its structure, the stronger it became. The stain, the humming, the physical toll, they were responses, amplifications triggered by my efforts. The apartment itself seemed to resonate, reacting to the notes. Wiping my damp forehead, a clammy chill settling over me, I made a decision. Stop. No more transcription, no more humming, no more attempts to understand. To complete the song, I now felt certain, would be to open a door, to allow whatever entity resided behind that plaster membrane to fully emerge. The thought alone provoked a visceral lurch in my stomach. Rolling onto my side, I tried desperately to block out the sound, seeking oblivion. Exhaustion must have claimed me eventually, because the shrill insistence of my morning alarm was the next thing I knew. Stiffly, painfully, I rose and stumbled towards the shower. My neck ached. The night's horrors felt both distant and terrifyingly immediate. In the daylight filtering through the window, the bedroom was silent. The stain remained, perhaps seeming less menacing, smaller, but I knew better. Work was an exercise in forced normalcy. Concentration fractured, thoughts inevitably circling back to the wall, the humming, the fear. I dreaded returning, yet there was nowhere else. I lingered at the office after hours, pretending to busy myself with irrelevant tasks, then nursed a solitary sandwich at a nearby cafe, delaying the inevitable. Finally, I stood before my apartment door again, the hallway light still stubbornly out. Keys fumbled in the lock. Inside, the familiar chill greeted me. Lights on, bag dropped. Each step toward the bedroom was hesitant, my breath held tight. Silence. Blessed, unnerving silence. My ears strained, searching for the familiar drone, but heard only the ambient hum of the building. The stain endured, dark and irregular against the white plaster, but inert. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a chilling counter-thought. Was it merely waiting? So now I sit here, committing this to words, my hands still betraying a slight tremor. True relaxation feels impossible. My gaze keeps drifting to the wall. The stain appears unchanged, yet my trust in appearances is shattered. I know the choral susurrus will return, and I know with chilling certainty that I cannot pursue that melody to its conclusion. To do so risks losing myself, becoming subsumed. It's a difficult admission, this fear. I've weathered storms before, but this adversary is different. It resides within these walls, perhaps within my own mind during unguarded sleep. Escape means abandoning everything. For now, bound by lease and circumstance, I remain. I will not transcribe another note. I will strive to ignore the humming, should it recommence. If its power grows unchecked, then I must find a way out. But the practicalities loom large. 6 months remain on the lease. My finances are precarious. How this unfolds, I cannot say. But I write this down as testament, as a reminder of the precipice. A reminder that I must not yield. I will not be its instrument. For now there is only the waiting, the listening, and the desperate hope of retaining my sanity.